So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then, as per Yeshayahu the prophet, there is a layer of understanding on the 61st chapter of Yeshayahu, where you find then simply a relation with Leviticus the 23rd chapter regarding then the feasts of the Creator, and also the understanding of the cities of the Messiah regarding then obviously the completion of the spring feast and then the autumn feast, mentioning of it, and also the returning of the holy cities during this time after 09. So then what is important then understanding these factors is a simple calculation. It helps us then understanding then the calculations, because obviously from the 23rd chapter of Leviticus it started then a calculation of the times and the seasons. That's why it's so important, not because of the religious aspect of it, but because of the calculation. So then during the time of Leviticus you find then the 23rd chapter, it's got 44 verses, and then you find from the first verse until the 21st verse you find the spring feast. This is what the Messiah came to do when he first came. Then the 22nd verse explains in the time of the Gentiles. That's why you have Ruth, for instance. And then from the 23rd verse until the 44th is the autumn feast known as vengeance. So then you have to understand the calculations. So then during the time when the Messiah then explained a time of lots of troubles and tribulations, and then the time would be reduced. He was explaining then from the viewpoint of the reduction of time from 7032 or 2032. Why? Because the calculation was then set very precisely, where the Messiah was born then in 4999 as per the original calendar, not the Julian calendar or then the Gregorian calendar, very popular these days. The regular calendar, as we know of, it's a Babylonian calendar, and then it is a Gregorian calendar from Gregory. It was a pope. They made it up, this calendar, and that's what we use these days. So then when we understand the prophecy, we must understand the calendar as per the original manuscripts, considering then the times and the seasons, then the lunar review of every month, and also the barley aviv. So then, based from the calculations of the original manuscripts, the Messiah was born 4999 mid-Tishri. This means mid-September, mid-month, first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. That's where then we find he tabernacled in with his people. So then, from this time on until he was placed on a pole was then 5032. It's a very easy calculation. 4999 plus his age, then 5032. He spent a couple of Yom creation days with the Samaritans, making 2,000 years. That's why then Shimon said, a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years a day. It was simple calculation. There is no religion in it. Then you calculate from 5032, a couple thousand years, then the Gentiles' rulership in the earth would last until 7032. We are then in 7013. So then there is a very short time until the prophecy expires. But then during this time, after 09, we've entered the time of the restoration period, where the cities of the Messiah then are returning. So then the world is adjusting itself, because from the 61st chapter the Gentiles were included during this time of the restoration period. So ever since we understand Gentile rulership with then the oversight of the Creator, you find then this time being restored. Obviously then the cities must give then directives, and then the world is preparing itself for the system of the end, known as the Chinese system, or the system of the dragon. It's not a bad term. simply means precision. Devil time was to and fro, then going and being confused, from 1009 to 2009. That's where you have the Nahashatan's facet of devil, slanderer, mocker. After 09, we've entered the facet of the dragon, precision. There is no more BS around. The system is adjusting itself for the trade computerized of the end, where you don't find any more the scoundrels stealing the money from governments. Because the system is so precise, any person trying to make a mockery out of it, they get caught. So then during this time, where then the nations, short while ago, came together and tried to impose themselves as they used to be, it won't work. For instance, then a few months ago, when then the Pacific were then lining up themselves for direct trade, must then return. As it was then in February or in March, those times of negotiations of the Asian countries must return, and they must resume their direct trade. This is what's coming in the future. This is what must come. So then, with this in mind, we understand then the simple factor of the calculations. There is no religion in it, where people then they can make their preparations, and then obviously preparing for the time of the end, trades-wise speaking, because the system of the dragon, or the Chinese system, it is already uploaded. It's not a situation of evaluating what's coming, what not, and then evaluating what would be coming and what not be coming, what would be the best or not. The system is already uploaded. So it is a situation of time waiting for the nations to line up themselves, understanding then a virtual monetary system, and understanding also the Chinese system has dual purpose. They have then the monetary system based by paper money, regulation, central bank, government, and so on and so forth. Also working as a decoy for the protection of the virtual monetary system. Obviously they have the virtual backed up by production. So then, not only then they have the ability of standing during a time where then the world is imposing the paper money situation, because the midman gets the scoundrelization with it, but then they have also the virtual system where nations are not much aware of it. If you understand the Bitcoin system, you will understand. But then the backing up of the virtual system is done by production. You begin to understand why then China has a vast resources of raw materials. Short while after this last visit of the countries, then in Ireland, you already found then China and the leaders of China visiting with the prominent companies. For instance, Samsung, they are having over there a visit, and obviously we can expect more from these huge big company. And the way their strategic works is then they have reduction of prices on their products. That's how they take out of the trade. So we are then during a time where when we post our products in a certain price, they get their products then with more features, reduced price, and then simply removes us out of the trade. So then the more we try to force the Chinese system and corner it, the worse it gets. Because the natural fact of the time of the dragon. Because the system is already uploaded. So those leaders, they came together, and obviously they come up with some sort of a plan where then their products are reduced, more features, and then they target the other companies. It's very popular. But not only this, then they improve their services. And then speaking of services, obviously the dragon market is becoming much more known, and there is already more than 30% of the entire dragon market system in Cancun, Mexico, already prepared and built. The Dubai Dragon's market is then obviously given a refurbishment. And not only this, if you read, then the objective of the Dragon market is then obviously also targeted for services. This means our sites or websites regarding services, for instance eBay, providing people with services, those are going to be non-existent, because these places, they are very expensive yet. When you compare what people are earning, what people are working, and then providing services via these sites such as eBay or Amazon, they charge a lot of money comparing with the situation of this crisis. When the Dragon market comes, they will absorb these trade also of the services. So people can do trade as they are doing in a normal way, as they are doing with Amazon or eBay or any other site, but then prices, they get very much reduced. So those other sites, they are nearly non-existent. So this is the advantage of the Dragon, because the Dragon is much more generous than the devil. Devilish time is gone. It's from 1009 to 2009. But people are trying to cling to those times where they can't anymore. It's no longer the time. We are neglecting the times and the seasons. That's why Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, is extremely important, because then it is subdivided in a couple of areas. Spring feast, autumn feast, and the counting, the calculation is done via this Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. So when we understand these times and the seasons, year after year, they celebrated and also maintained the feasts regularly every year, because they were then familiar with the time and prophecies and seasons of time. That's why then Shaliach Shaul said, as far as his times and seasons, he would not have to explain them, because they knew, they were acquainted with it. But these days, people are not acquainted with it. Some people, they have the wrong idea that then serpent, devil, dragon, those are the same thing. They are not. As you understand times and the seasons, so the facets of Nahashatan also changes. We are during the time of the Dragon. And the Asian market must return as they were in March. They must continue with their systematic partnership of trade, and then obviously helping the other nations of being linked up with it, and help the people then obviously having more jobs. So then, with this understanding in mind, we can obviously get ourselves a very capable computer, maybe a 5-decker hard drive, because the system is truly coming. It is already uploaded. They are only working in logistics, making sure then the nations are linked up with it. In a shortly 30 months, you can absolutely be sure of it, the system will become available. Because the BRICS, then, the precursor of the system, is already thinking on then not using anymore USD. And there are a lot of countries doing already direct trade without USD. So as our economy does not improve, and then the Asians then they return to their partnerships, then shortly after, if we don't do our homework, if we do not start taxation and trading combined because of the virtual market, monetary market, such as Bitcoin for instance, but then if you understand the Chinese system, you find those then combined. You find the paper money and you find then the virtual at the same time. You have to understand how it works. The virtual side of it is direct to trade, does not use USD when usable. The other, it is a regular paper money subjected then to fluctuations. And when the situation becomes critical as it is, then they simply manipulate, in quote, their monetary paper money and works as a decoy, while then the virtual gets worked on from behind. And that's what is already uploaded in the system and backed up by production. So they are very smart. but then causes us of doing a refurbishment of our own, where then taxation is combined with freighting. Means every time there is a label printed for a parcel, then taxes must be deducted. Because in the future, with the virtual monetary system of China, there is no way of knowing what's coming in those boxes, other than from a record of the freighter, because there is no link with the central bank.